It was June 12, 1977. Dozens of Girl Scouts arrived at Camp Scott in Mays County, Oklahoma. For decades, this camp had been a place of fun and adventure. That year, the excitement was high. Parents said goodbye, buses rolled in, and the girls set up in rustic canvas tents. Among them were Lori Farmer, age 8, Michelle Goose, 9, and Denise Milner, 10. None of them knew this first night would also be their last. Camp Scott had been running since the 1920s. It spanned over 400 acres of woods and meadows, with units of tents spread across the property. Each unit had its own name. Lori, Michelle, and Denise were placed in the Kiowa unit, tent number 7, tucked away at the far end, partially hidden from view. It was one of the more isolated spots, farthest from the counselors' tents. Lori Lee Farmer was just 8 years old, the youngest camper that session, a bright, happy child. She was known for her blonde pigtails and kind personality. Lori loved helping others, and she'd been thrilled to go camping for the first time. Michelle Heather Goose was 9 years old, curious and intelligent. She had a love for science and nature. She wore round glasses and carried a journal to jot down her thoughts. Michelle was excited to make new friends at camp. Doris Denise Milner was 10 years old. She had been nervous about going to camp, reluctant to leave her mother's side. Her mother encouraged her, telling her she'd have fun. Denise was smart, athletic, and strong-willed. She was the only African-American camper in the Kiowa unit, and she was placed in tent number 7 with Lori and Michelle. That first evening was filled with laughter, songs, and the usual energy of kids on their first night away. The counselors led activities, and later, the girls settled into their tents. As night fell, the Kiowa unit grew quiet, the woods around it alive with crickets and frogs. No one at Camp Scott could have known what was about to unfold. What few realized at the time was that Camp Scott had already shown troubling signs. During a staff training session in April 1977, one of the counselors' tents was ransacked. Supplies were stolen and a box of donuts left behind, and inside it, a handwritten note. It said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. It was dismissed as a tasteless prank, but in hindsight, it reads like a grim prophecy. Other incidents were reported too. Slashed tents, missing supplies, and uneasy feelings among some staff. While nothing directly pointed to danger, there was an unsettling undercurrent. But with dozens of excited campers set to arrive, the focus remained on keeping the summer session running smoothly. On June 12th, the girls settled in for their first night. A thunderstorm swept over Camp Scott, rain hammering the canvas tents, thunder echoing through the trees. In tent 7, Lori, Michelle, and Denise tried to sleep through the storm. It was loud, chaotic, and perfect cover for anyone moving quietly in the dark. Later that night, some campers reported hearing unusual noises, moans, shuffling, even a scream. A counselor thought it might just be a girl having nightmares. The storm made it difficult to tell. No one could confirm exactly what was happening in the darkness beyond the tents. Inside tent 7, Lori, Michelle, and Denise settled into their sleeping bags. Counselors had checked on them earlier, finding nothing unusual. But sometime after midnight, someone entered the tent. Evidence later showed a flashlight had been used, its lens covered to dim the beam. The intruder struck while the camp slept. What exactly happened inside tent 7 that night has never been fully reconstructed, but by morning, it would be clear that 3 young girls had been brutally attacked. The storm that masked their cries also washed away crucial evidence. By sunrise, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders had begun. At dawn on June 13th, a counselor headed down the trail toward the camp showers. Along the path, she noticed something strange, a sleeping bag lying in the dirt. Inside was the body of Denise Milner. Just a short distance away, 2 more sleeping bags were discovered. They contained Lori Farmer and Michelle Goose. The girls had been bound, bludgeoned, and strangled. Their bodies had been dragged from tent 7 down to the trail, about 150 yards away. It was a crime scene so brutal that it shocked even seasoned investigators. As word spread, the camp was thrown into chaos. Counselors rushed to gather the other girls, trying to keep them calm, while law enforcement was called. Parents were notified, and within hours, Camp Scott was shut down. It would never reopen to campers again. Investigators quickly moved in. The area around Tent 7 and the trail was taped off. A bloody footprint was found inside the tent, a shoe print, size 9.5. The red plastic flashlight left on the girls' bodies held a partial fingerprint, but the heavy rain had already washed away much of the evidence. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation joined local authorities. They combed through the woods, interviewing staff and counselors, and collecting anything that could serve as evidence. The investigation was massive, but pressure was immediate. Families and the public demanded answers. The murder sent shockwaves through Oklahoma and the nation. Locust Grove, a quiet rural community, suddenly found itself at the center of national headlines. Fear spread quickly. If 3 children could be killed at summer camp, where was safe anymore? Inside Tent 7, investigators found a single bloody footprint. It appeared to be from a size 9.5 shoe, likely a military-style boot. This detail would later become central to the case, suggesting a male intruder with a distinct shoe size, but no matching pair was ever found. Another crucial piece of evidence was a red plastic flashlight found on top of the girls' bodies. Its lens had been covered, possibly to dim the light. On that lens was a partial fingerprint. Unfortunately, technology at the time couldn't conclusively match it to a suspect. Ropes and gag materials were also collected at the scene. Investigators believed they had been used to bind the girls before they were murdered. The knots appeared crude but deliberate, offering possible insight into the attacker's methods. In 1977, forensic science was still limited. DNA testing did not exist in criminal investigations. Evidence like hair samples, fingerprints, and bodily fluids could be collected, but analysis relied heavily on comparison and probability rather than certainty. Based on the footprint, the flashlight, and the method of entry, investigators were convinced the killer was someone familiar with the area. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered it was a local man. Others feared it was something hiding in the woods. Though limited at the time, some of the evidence was preserved. Decades later, with advances in DNA testing, these same items would be re-examined, offering stronger clues about the identity of the killer. But in 1977, the case was already growing cold. The investigation soon focused on one man, Gene Leroy Hart. Hart was a Cherokee man who had grown up just a few miles from Camp Scott. At 34 years old, he was already a convicted essayist and prison escapee. In 1973, he had escaped from the Mays County Jail and had been on the run for 4 years by the time of the murders. Investigators believed Hart had both motive and opportunity. His past crimes included the brutal essay of 2 pregnant women. He had ties to the Cherokee community near Camp Scott, where he was rumored to be hiding during his years on the run. Locals reported sightings of him, and some evidence from the crime scene was thought to match items linked to him. The search for Hart became one of the largest manhunts in Oklahoma history. Dozens of officers, deputies, and federal agents scoured the hills and back roads. He was finally captured in April of 1978. Nearly a year after the murders, authorities were convinced they had their killer. Hart went to trial in 1979. Prosecutors argued that his violent history, his escape from jail, and his proximity to Camp Scott made him the obvious suspect. But defense attorneys countered that the evidence was circumstantial. The partial fingerprint from the flashlight couldn't be matched with certainty. The bloody footprint couldn't be tied directly to Hart. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only a short time. Their verdict shocked many. Not guilty. Gene Leroy Hart was acquitted of the murders of Lori Farmer, Michelle Goose, and Denise Milner. Families of the victims were devastated, and much of the public believed justice had failed. Though acquitted, Hart was immediately returned to prison to serve out sentences for his earlier crimes. Just 2 months later, in June 1979, he collapsed and died of a heart attack while exercising. To some, it felt like karma. To others, it left the truth even murkier, because the murders of the 3 Girl Scouts remained officially unsolved. In the years after the acquittal, the victims' families filed a civil lawsuit against the Magic Empire Girl Scout Council, accusing them of negligence. In 1985, a jury ruled in favor of the council. For grieving families, it felt like another failure of the justice system. Camp Scott was immediately shut down after the murders. Though once a beloved summer retreat, it never reopened. The land sat abandoned, the old tents and cabins eventually reclaimed by the woods. To this day, locals say the camp remains haunted by its history. In the decades that followed, investigators revisited the evidence. In 1989, primitive DNA probes pointed toward Hart, but couldn't be conclusive. By 2017 and 2022, newer testing strongly suggested that Hart's genetic profile matched samples from the scene. Still, without a conviction, the case remains officially unsolved. In recent years, the McGirt v. Oklahoma ruling gave tribal nations more authority over crimes involving Native Americans on reservation land. Some wondered if this could open new avenues in the Girl Scout case. Since Hart was Cherokee and much of the area falls under tribal jurisdiction, authorities began reviewing leads once more. Through all the trials and rumors, the focus has always returned to the three young girls whose lives were cut short: Lori Farmer, Michelle Goose, and Denise Milner. Their families continue to speak their names, determined to make sure they are remembered for who they were, not just for how they died. More than 4 decades later, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders remain one of the most haunting, unsolved cases in American history. DNA points strongly towards Hart, yet the law never convicted him. The evidence, the families, and the unanswered questions linger in the shadows of Camp Scott, a reminder of innocence lost and justice never found. If you want to become a Veil Walker, smash that like button, shoot a comment, and subscribe.